Welcome to Three Tiny Questions. Three Tiny Questions with Jissan Cherian, CMO of PetIQ. Welcome to Three Tiny Questions, the podcast where we, three tiny partners, ask the leading minds in marketing one question each about brands, trends, culture, or whatever else comes to mind in an effort to make the world of advertising a tiny bit smarter. I'm Mike Rovner, partner at Tiny, an ad agency that's devoted to making great work with great people and having a great time doing it. And with me, as always, are my two darling, handsome partners. Where are you? There they are. Tom Chrisman and Michael Stupak. Say hello, fellas.
Hello, fellas.
Hello, fellas.
All right. On today's episode of Three Tiny Questions, we are joined by the CMO of PetIQ, author of the newly published Hack the Corporate Learning Curve, Strategic Personal Branding that Gets You Noticed and Promoted, our client and our friend, Jissan Cherian.
Cheers, cheers, cheers.
So let's get started. Why don't you, Jissan, we like to, before our question, this is not one of the questions, just first of all, we have to preface. Let's get started by you telling us a little bit about your career and what you do now.
Yeah, sure. So Jissan Cherian, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at PetIQ. Been in this role for about 9 months now. Truly love it, right? So first of all, being able to work with brands where pets are kind of the day-to-day, goal. And, when you run into tough problems and challenges and things like that, it kind of makes it easier to just progress and find that solution, because I think we're all pet parents, or a pet parent, and it's a lot like having kids, and for a lot of those relationships, the same emotional bonds that come with like the baby category, and how you can tell amazing stories, right? It's truly a wonderful kind of space to be in. So have loved the last 9 months. We've done some fun stuff, and we'll continue to do some cool work together as well, which I'm happy to get into. But my history prior to that, I started in Microsoft. So I came in with kind of an IT background, management information systems. Did that for about 3 years. Really geeky, like software, hardware installs, building servers, hardcore tech stuff. Didn't like it, but one part that I really enjoyed was when we got to speak to the business about their requirements. So how are you going to use this technology? What's the purpose of this? What's the business objective? And that got me even more geeked around like building markets, building brands and things like that. But I was the IT guy, right? So it was ready for a change, and went over to Deloitte Consulting, did strategy consulting, but still in the tech space. And then eventually I went and got my MBA, and that allowed someone to say, yes, now this guy can do marketing, right? Because somewhere on a piece of paper, it says that I learned marketing. And then I've had this wonderful career at GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare. So I went from the US to Vietnam to Central and Eastern Europe. I did a mix of business development, marketing, and sales roles in over a 13-year career. Just really enjoyed it. And then eventually ended that last role that I was in, was leading the $1 billion digestive health portfolio, which includes Tums, Nexium, Benefiber. I would always say it's everything from butt to guts, right? So, all the brands that kind of, help you along that way. But truly enjoyed it. And then actually decided to retire. So I kind of hit 20 years of corporate, retired, started my own little company. And I was doing that, and I was just kind of hanging out until a CEO called me and said, would you come out of retirement and join us as a CMO? And here I am, right? So that's the story.
That is a great story and a perfect segue to our first question.
It's time for question one.
You mentioned your first job as CMO, your first year at PetIQ, done and dusted. What are the most valuable lessons you've learned in that first year as a CMO?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first one is how do you define what great creative looks like in the eyes of different people within the organization, right? So one of the first things I came in with the ask was, hey, we have an unbelievable set of brands. Historically, I've been focused on value messaging. Let's focus on brand building. Now, that's an easy thing to kind of say, but for a lot of different people within the department and in the organization, they don't know necessarily what's the difference between good, great, and amazing creative, right? And there's a little bit of, before you kind of set the direction and inspire and drive them there, you have to kind of educate them and bring them along the way. So I've had a wonderful experience the first 7 months, just digging into great examples of creative and sitting there in a room together and talking about what makes that ad so wonderful? How did science come through in that ad that was easy to understand versus something we just watched that was complex? So almost taking the pause with the entire department to kind of say, let's all have a shared understanding of what good, great, excellent looks like. And then we start to put in briefs and intention on how we're going to build creative, right? So that was probably the first big lesson. I think the second one is just how do you build trust quickly in an organization? So when you're brought in as a CMO, there's not this 6 to 9 month take it easy, learn the business. Feel free to let us know if you have a question, right? It's very much, hey, you showed up yesterday. We got 3 decisions that need to be made by Wednesday. Here's the inputs and kind of figure it out. But if you don't pause to build relationships and connect with people and know how the organization operates, you're gonna be set up for failure, right? So I enjoyed that fact that I was able to jump in and start doing really strategic work. But I also really enjoyed learning from others and understanding what we've done, why we did it. There's always intention behind every decision that was made previously. So let's understand those. Let's make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel. But at the same time, here's a bunch of cool stuff that we could do with these businesses. So yeah, it's been good, man.
Yeah, getting trust going in the space of time while you're trying to make decisions and bring people along and, and make, you brought in to make changes, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's it.
To an
And
organization, to an organization that hadn't been used to change, right? I mean, they're pretty firm in their ways for a long time.
Yeah, and I think, and the business was incredibly successful, right? So, the if I was on the other side of it, I would say, hey, what's the intention for us to want to do all this stuff if business has always been performing well, we always beat our financials, and the business is very healthy. I think the whole premise is there's stages of growth, and we may be reaching a ceiling of this version of the growth, and to unlock the next level, it's how do we build iconic brands? How do we tell amazing stories, right? How do we connect to the hearts and the mind when we think about science as well as having an emotional connection with these brands?
So glad we met you.
Cool.
So glad.
I know, right? Such a cool dude. Speaking of cool, that's a cool segue to our second question. I'm going to throw you the second one right about now.
It's time for question 2.
Okay, the default assumption when we're talking about great work, like the truly great work that we can all kind of recite, is that there's bravery involved. And it's, my experience, the bravery is usually the client on the other side of the table because, ask any agency to be brave. They're like, hold my beer, of course. Do you think it's the brave agency, the brave client? Is it a combination of both? Can you just speak to courage when it comes to branding? Because a lot of brands, like you just said, there's no reason for PetIQ necessarily needed to do anything bold, but you're doing it anyway. And what do you think the value of that is?
Look, I think creative bravery is something that there's different reasons you want to go for it. One could be, hey, I want to go get awards and I want to be recognized in that thing. That's superficial, and usually that gets to inauthentic work, right? It's like creative for the sense of we wanted to be bold and we just wanted to try something and shock someone. It has a shock value and then it kind of quickly erodes and goes away. Creative bravery, the way that I think about this, is finding an insight that's so unique and human, and it has attention and it has the ability for us to build an incredible story around. And if we find that insight, it gives us the permission to now think about what are all the variations of being able to inform consumers of this insight through storytelling. And then you get to have creative bravery, right? Because now we're talking about science. We're talking about, okay, we got to explain the science. Well, there are so many creative ways to do science. You can do Bill Nye Science Guy, experiments that are just very homey. You can go into, very CGI, going through the bloodstream, very scientific. But at the end of the day, there's a permission because of the insights work that was done. So when I challenge teams always, it's how early can we bring creative into the decision making, brainstorming. It's not an output, they have a seat at the table from day one when we're learning the insights. So when research is coming back and we're finding out these fresh insights, it's not that the brand team has already synthesized it, identified the perfect insight and delivered it to a creative team to go and build an amazing creative. It's actually, let's push it further up the creative supply chain Let's have the creative sitting at the table when insights are being discovered and let them build on it, right? So that what comes out of that is something that's jointly owned. And in my experience on the brands that have really had breakthrough creative, it's we all had a very shared understanding because we may have all heard from the same consumer in a focus group. And we were all inspired at that moment. And we remember in between the break rambling and talking about an insight. And by the time we get to here's the brief, let's start telling the story, we have so much history of coming together with this idea. And now, like, the explosion of creative bravery comes in because it came from an authentic place, right? We have a desire to teach a consumer something really meaningful.
Are you saying, or am I hearing that the bravery often comes from the insight itself? So just for instance, not to toot our own horns here, but dog breath is over, right? The just coming to that. Now that might be the expression of what we're saying, but the insight really was that if this new product that nobody's ever seen before will actually be loved by dogs as it is, it's all natural. It does smell amazing. It does cure the breath and all that stuff, but it chews longer for real, like real differences. The whole idea of dog breath is eliminated. Well, that's an insight, and that's a brave insight, right? You're nodding because I totally fed you this one just for, Tiny is available.
Well, we do a good job of throwing up the alley oop and dunking it, right? So I think you're exactly right. It's basically the fact that we got to that creative space. Then we started saying, okay, well, then why do dogs sniff each other's butts when they meet each other? Well, that's something that everyone knows is absolutely a matter of fact, right? So then why don't we flip that on its head?
I will say the bravest part of all of that, like, so finding the insight, agreeing that, starting down the road of, the execution and the idea and that expression, but to actually, like, go ahead and, recognize and be honest about when dogs get together, they go right for the private parts, right? And that's something that, you wouldn't necessarily expect somebody to be okay saying. And whenever you share the first spot and it opens with,
This just in, dogs no longer sniff each other's butts.
okay, so my career, I'm done now, right? Like, never thought I'd get this. I got this.
Yeah,
By the way, we're talking about Minty's Fresh Bites.
there it is.
Minty's Fresh Bites. Dog breath is officially over.
I think I hear something. Is that the third question sound?
It's time for question 3.
Jissan, your book, Hack the Corporate Learning Curve. It's about taking ownership of our personal brands inside of systems that may not have been designed for personal brands. And people, I think, are kind of, they're timid. They don't want to go out and start pushing their personal brand. So as someone who went from Microsoft, a very corporate place, to pharma, to now pet health, what does that instinct to brand yourself, what does the brand instinct look like in practice, and can you teach it?
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you first of all for acknowledging the book. It's a real passion project, and it's a real cool opportunity for me to kind of consolidate 20 years of what I've learned along the way and try to put it down on paper, right? So I think one of the biggest things is that the personal brand is always evolving. So one of the things that we get into in the book, and just what I believe naturally, is that based on your career stage, what your financial needs are, what stage are you in family, and all of those things that matter outside of work will all dictate how you kind of think about your personal brand at that point in time. And then as you start to get wins, as your career grows, perhaps there's some lessons learned where things failed and you came back and you're stronger for it. All of those things are going to continue to evolve that personal brand. Then you start to lead people, and all of a sudden you have teams, and the stuff you used to do to get a bunch of projects done doesn't work because you're not actually the one doing it anymore. It's your team. How do you influence that, right? So naturally, this personal brand has to keep evolving as you go. And I took it from the spirit of how I think about corporate branding, right? So if we all think about brand development of these beautiful, amazing CPG brands, we're meticulous about consumer perception, market awareness. What are the channels I should be in? Am I speaking to the right consumer? All of those lessons can be applicable to ourselves if we think about ourselves as a personal brand. So what do people know about me versus what's the perception of me? What are the projects that I want to have versus the projects I'm being told to do? How much of a control do I have in terms of my personal narrative? What's important to me? How I think about things. Now, when you're an individual contributor, you're very early in your career. It's just a matter of knocking things out, being dependable, people looking at you and seeing you as someone that they want in the room because you ask good questions. It could be as simple as that. but eventually it evolves, right? And then it becomes something more meaningful when you're later in your career. Like my personal brand, for example, I'll share it with people all the time, is to develop the next generation of inclusive leaders. So it could be in the marketing world, it could be just people leaders, but we're at a place where there's a rub between employees and corporate entities. Everyone's seen as a cog, everyone feels like they're a cog in the machine. They don't know if managers really, care about their development. So there's a little bit of, you got to take ownership of it for yourselves. And then how do you use all those corporate resources that are available to you, not in an egotistical way, but more of a self-awareness?
I love that when you were talking about personal brand, you were talking about tactics. You were talking about things. You were talking about things that people have to do, and not just how do you get ahead for yourself. You're talking about how do you lead people through your brand. I found this book on servant leadership when I started to become a leader of people, because I had that problem, and a lot of creative people in advertising have that problem as they come up, because when you're creative, you're all about you. You have to win and beat everybody and kill everyone. Right. And then when you're a leader, you have to be all about the other people, and it's a huge, hard thing to do. And one way to do that is to change how you think about you. And I think learning does that too. So I can't wait to read your book and learn about that.
And what's fun about this whole thing is that even within the department at PetIQ and marketing, we've all kind of been working on our individual personal brands, but we were able to roll that up to what that means for us as a department. So our department culture, our department brand within PetIQ will be a reflection of the people that work on it. So the individual personal brands kind of roll up to what our department stands for. So, it becomes a nice little feeling of connectiveness, right? And I think we're in a place where we all need to be connected a little bit more.
100%.
That's very cool.
This has been 3 Tiny Questions with Jissan Cherian. A tremendous tiny thanks to him.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You can check him out on LinkedIn and check out his book wherever their books are sold. Hack the Corporate Learning Curve, Strategic Personal Branding that gets you noticed and promoted. Thank you so much, Jissan. And you can check out us, more about Tiny, at tinyadagency.com and all over your LinkedIn feeds. Tune in next time for more 3 Tiny Questions. Stay tiny.
Stay tiny.
That just was 3 tiny questions. Not 4 or 2 or 1 question, because why would we name a podcast 3 Tiny Questions if there are more or less than those 3? Wouldn't make much sense now, would it? Just like this song doesn't make much sense, but who cares? It's fun to sing. Stay tiny, everyone!